we used to have a lot of conflicts in the airport. We'd go into the airport, and I'd want to get the rental car, and she'd want to get the luggage, and I'd want to get to the gate, and she'd want to have yogurt, and we just would be conflict. So one time, we went to the airport, and it was beautiful. We just went through, and we didn't have an argument, didn't have a crossword, and we sat down at the gate, and I was so excited about it, the fact that we had had no problems. I just thought
I know,
that was
and then
neat.
I ruined it. Because, see, before we went to the airport that day, I thought, this is not working. And so I'm just going to do everything that Chuck says, which I did. And it really worked great, but I ruined it because when he said, boy, that was really great. And I said, well, that's because I did everything that you said. And he heard it. That's because I did everything you said.
That's the way you said it.
I didn't say it. No, I didn't.
So, but since we can hear each other's hearts now, I know that she wants to make. So we go get the rental car if I want to, and we get the luggage.
I do everything you say all the time.
Well, hardly that, but once in a while. Take hotels. Barb has the gift of hotels, and I'm a firstborn, and I need to follow the rules. And so when the door person gives us room 205, that is the room that God, before the foundation of the earth, wanted us to be in. And Barb says it's too close to the elevator, or it doesn't smell right, and so we have to move.
Well, I think since we're paying for it, we ought to be able to be happy. So I just go down and say, I'm not really pleased with this room, and could I look at some other rooms? And sometimes they give me 5 keys, and I just go around and look at the rooms, and then I come back and tell Chuck which one was the good one. I mean, we went to Hawaii, and they put us on the parking lot. Well, I thought, why be in Hawaii and be on the parking lot? So I went down and got this great lanai, over garden and everything. And that used to just upset him. See, Chuck doesn't believe in all rules, only the rules that he wants to believe in. And the rules that you don't follow all the rules. If you break them.
If the rule is right, I follow it.
Yeah.
And so, now when we go in the hotel, in fact, we did this just last week, I knew there was going to be hassle on getting into our little room, so I always have a book, and I gave her the American Express card, and I went to sit down in the Davenport, and she went up and dealt with the people at the desk. So there again, we compromised, and that's a gift that she has. We were in Washington, D.C. We were a little bit late for our reservation. I went up to the desk. The guy said, I'm sorry, we don't have it. We gave it away. And I said, fine, I'm on to Motel 6 or something. And Barb went up and said, of course you have extra rooms. Don't you have any corporate? I mean, she just, very nicely, very good attitude. And then they discovered they did, and so we stayed there. But it wouldn't even occur to me to negotiate in that regard.
Well, let me ask you something. Why are you so, if you're not headstrong other places, why are you so headstrong with me?
I don't think I've been asked that question before. I don't think I am. I think I'm very compliant, submissive. I do just about everything you want to do.
You know what he is? He's passive-aggressive. He may not say the words, but his body, everything about him, he will work around in this way. Ever since we've written the book, we talked about him being passive-aggressive. If he stretches, that means it's time to go. And every woman at the table goes, is it time to go?
I am very submissive now. There's a book called Is It Worth Dying For? It's a book on anger. It's a wonderful book. His last page had this comment, and I want to apply it to marriage. It said, don't sweat the little things. And then the second principle is it's all little things. And I really believe that applies in marriage as well. Personality types are not wrong. Barb's motto is kind of what you see is what you get. She's ready, aim, fire. I tend to be ready, fire, aim. And that's just difference in personalities. Barb likes to do things right. I like to do things right away. And so we conflict there. I don't need to change the impulsive part of me if it doesn't involve her.
But most impulsive people are spenders. And if it involves money, then it involves the family.
And I have to check with it.
Chuck's bought every piece of exercise equipment known to man. From the time we were young marrieds, I mean, there were always barbells that I was tripping over that weren't being used, that were just sitting there.
Well, now, let me clarify that a little bit. I would like to look like Schwarzenegger. I mean, let's just face it, that would be I like muscles, and so what I would do is go out and get a piece of equipment, because the picture in the ad, boy, these guys and gals look beautiful, and that's obviously this machine did that. And so I would go out and get it, and I'd do it for, say, like 2 weeks. I was out there every day. And then I look in the mirror, and I haven't changed one bit. And why would I want to continue that if something that doesn't going to make any difference? And so I go out for ice cream and pizza, and I just say, well, forget that, and so it does lay around a little bit.
Do you know what a universal gym is? Chuck bought this universal gym, only he forgot to measure it to see if it would fit in the basement. And he couldn't get it up, and so he had to build an exercise house for the universal gym to go in. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing impulsive people do.
I use it for birdseed right now, but I'm going to get out there any minute.
We were going to have people over one day, and I went out there, and there were cobwebs clear up and down the door. And I wanted to take a picture of those cobwebs that hadn't been opened for so long.
Usually impulsive people like me are not as structured. Barb is more structured. But this may come as a shock. I have a stamp collection, and that's very structured. I don't have it in the books yet. I have it in boxes, and there's little boxes, and my little coin collection's in boxes too. Barbara visits her family in Wenatchee, and I haven't found anybody yet that tells me why I should make the bed. I mean, she's in Wenatchee, right? And I'm home, and I'm just going to get in it tonight, and then I get up tomorrow morning, and I get in it tomorrow night. And I get in the next. Why would I make that? I can't understand. And why would I do the dishes? We have dishes that we've had there since our marriage, our wedding, 37 years ago or so, because we keep washing the front row, And I think we ought to just stack them in the sink so they really look nice. But since God has asked me to honor Barb, just before she comes home, I wash the dishes and I make the bed once. I don't spend my terminal years doing all that stuff. So from an impulsive standpoint, who cares? But if you care, then I need to be a little more structured on that. Barb is not so perfect. I don't want you to get the idea that she's perfect. She kind of looks like that. But when we would go to Wenatchee, that's a fruit country over there. And her folks would pile up our trunk with apples and peaches and corn and whatnot. We'd come home, and I'd put it in the garage, all this stuff. And then 6 months later, I'd put it in the garbage. One time I kind of got in trouble because I said to Barb, why don't we just take it from the trunk to the garbage rather than just storing it all that time, And then one other little weakness she has is that there's a lot of little Tupperware deals in our refrigerator that we're not really sure what they are. They grow things, and once in a while when I open the refrigerator, a green feeler like that, and that's the macaroni and cheese from Christmas or something. But that's okay. You can be different, and I'll just be careful when I open the things.
Mm-hmm. We want to tell you some of the differences between men and women, and these are general differences and may not always be true, but generally true. Men are into goals, like the goal of getting your wife, and then you're on to other things. Women are into relationships, and see, that's the surprise in marriage, is that we believe that we're going to have the type of relationship that we have when we're courting for the rest of our lives. And it is such a surprise to us when you guys go off and see, and you should be into goals, and it's the proper thing because you are told to provide for us. And so that's very scriptural that you're into goals. It's very scriptural that we're into relationships because Titus tells us to older women to teach the younger women to love their husbands and to love their children, be keepers of the home. So we should be into relationships. It's instinctive for us to be into relationships, and it's instinctive for you to be into goals. However, it is, Chuck asked me to marry him like this. I've been thinking. And I didn't know he was going to start every sentence that way for the rest of our life. Actually, we met at Washington State University. Chuck had a Western band called Chuck's Chucklers, and he worked his way through school with that Western band, and on Sundays he came to the sorority houses or the dorms to play for his Sunday dinner.
Well, my meal wasn't included in my board bill, so I could take the band over, eat with girls. I like girls better than boys, and had a free meal and play music. Well, I mean, doesn't get much better than that,
No.
you know.
So I sat across the table from him, and that day, you know, you always had to have someone assigned to the phone. And I happened to be in that place, and I sat across the table from him, and I decided that this is the man that I was going to marry. I didn't know anything about him. I thought I was a Christian. I was not. I believed that Jesus Christ died for the sins of the whole world. I went to church all the time. We were raised in a quote-unquote Christian home, but there had never been a time that I'd asked him to come into my life and told him that I would follow him. But I told Chuck I was a Christian. Then I called home that night. Instead, I'd met the man I was going to marry, and Mother asked lots of questions about him that I didn't know. But I did know that he was a cute sense of humor, and he was handsome, and he was fun, and he listened to me. And what I didn't know is that he thought the same thing. I've met the gal I'm going to marry. But anyway, he started to play, and I was so upset because I had a date that afternoon with a 5'8" folk singer.
Looked like a big football player to me.
I know that's what Chuck remembered.
It's about 6'8", 280. I thought that was about right.
Yeah. But anyway, I found out that he was going to a conference. In those days, in the olden days, YWCA and YMCA were really big on campus. And the Wholesome kids belonged to that, see. And Chuck was chairman of this conference, and I had been asked to go as a delegate. And it was 2 weeks after we got out of school. And I really a homebody, so I didn't want to go. But when I found out he was chairman of it, I thought, oh, I think I'll run up the hill and tell him I'll go, which I did. And it was at the end of that week at the conference that we were engaged.
Well, you see something good, go for it. I mean, why would you mess around?
And for some reason, I said yes, too. But he said, I've been thinking, we could get married. I have to go in the service after we get out of college, see, and this was going to be his senior year and my sophomore year. And I have to go in the service when I get out of college for 2 years. So at the end of those 2 years, we could be married. So that was far enough away, I thought. So I said, I thought that was a good idea. And then all this happened, you know, that week. I've been thinking, well, we could get married when I got out, when I graduate. I've been thinking we could get married at spring vacation. And then I've been thinking we could get married in between semesters, and Mother said he couldn't say I've been thinking anymore. So we were married 8 months after we met. But see, when he sets a goal, he wants to accomplish it, then he wants to get on to another goal. I want to set a goal, accomplish it, and then enjoy it. See, I don't have to set another goal immediately. So I am into the process, and Chuck is into the end result. I have a friend who, they were out walking one day, and there's a lot of neat walking areas in Seattle. And she just was going to enjoy being with him. She was going to enjoy the relationship. She was just going to love being with him, and he was just bored to tears. And she thought, what can I do to make him have more fun just walking? And she said to him, let's see how many people we can pass. And he had a ball the rest of the day, passing people. When a woman goes into church...
I mean, we're going to accomplish something, right? We're going to accomplish a goal.
I guess that you
and
have
that's
to...
get beyond that other couple.
And it's competitive.
Yeah, but just willy-nilly visiting and things, I mean, I think it's nice, but you don't really accomplish anything of that. It's got to have something to accomplish.
Yes.
Yeah.
And women don't necessarily.
She goes out with her friend just to have lunch. I mean, they don't have a plan, they don't have an agenda, just to have lunch, and I can't believe people can do that.
Yeah.
And then she'll be out there 3 hours, and I'll say, what'd you say? Well, I don't know. She really can't tell me what she said.
Yeah.
I guess it's just the relationship
Yeah,
that you're into,
it
right?
is. And when we come into church, see, if I were to come into this church I'd look around to see who I knew to sit with. You guys just come in and sit down.
Well, we're here to hear the sermon.
It
So why
seems
would you
more
want to sit with
spiritual, but I want to
anybody?
share that sermon with someone. Men do things together, and women, they do things. But women are into just being more. When we have goals too, you know, but they usually have to do with the home, and we'll talk about the home a little bit later. You know, a man is more nomadic because he can come in and say that he has been transferred, and he's going to take his most important relationships with him. But our roots go down into our relationships, and I know several years ago, Chuck felt that we should change churches, and we've been going to the church that Dick and Shar were youth pastors at for over 20 years. And so I could hardly stand the thought of leaving my friends. Of course, friends will always be friends, but it isn't the same when you're not sharing experiences. That probably the hardest thing I ever did was go to that church, that new church. Well, after you're there a year or so, then you couldn't leave that one either. And so it's just that we're so into relationships. In the baseball wives, the husbands are on the road sometimes as much as 18 days. 13 days is nothing. And so they have to make friends in order to exist. So when we go to the park and sit with the women, there's like a party every night at the ballpark because the girls know each other so well and have gotten their relationships. But there's one thing that happens with husbands and wife, and that is that when the husband comes home, he's been out talking all day, and he's been having a great time out. And when he's out, he's active, articulate, energetic in his work and tuned in. But when he's home, he's lethargic, inarticulate, inactive, and tuned out. See? And we wonder, how could this happen? Because we see, or, you know, you guys get on the phone, and then we find out what happens when we hear you talk to somebody on the phone.
Even if a woman's in the marketplace and works all day, when she comes home tired, she'll still be more open to talk after maybe half hour
That's right.
than a man will.
There's a great little book out, been out for years and years, and it's called Passive Men and Wild Women by Pierre Mornell. Little tiny book. It's a secular book. And see, because we're relational, we want something more. We want to talk a little bit. We want to share our experiences. We want to get mental reactions from you as well as physical reactions. We want to have a relationship. But when we're not able to do this, you know, we say the wife goes to the husband and says, "Can we talk?" And he's tired. He's worked all day. He's worked hard. And he says, I just want to kick back. I just want to watch TV. I just want to read the newspaper. And so she said, well, you know, he deserves it. He should be able to do that. And then she asks him again, and he doesn't talk. And again, and we go through the same thing. And so pretty soon, the wife decides, well, I guess I'll call Susie. I guess I'll call Phyllis. I guess I'll call Sally. And we'll gonna get the relationship somewhere, but we really want the relationship with the husband. So we come back and we say, honey, can we talk? You just never talk to me. And he says, how can I talk? You're always on the phone. That is when we come not easily restrained, angry, vexed, crazed, in a state of disorder, disarrangement, and confusion. See, wild. And see, what we haven't realized is that the most important thing that a man does for us to show us that he loves us is work. And so the most important part of you guys' day is over when you come home. But one of the most important parts of our day is just starting, and that's a relationship with you. And so it's just difficult to mesh those two things.
Not all of you men are goal-oriented like Barb is describing. Not all you women are relationship-oriented. There are some back and forth. Some of you some men are relationship-oriented, some women are really goal-oriented. And that doesn't mean women don't have goals. It means they're different goals. They're relationship goals. Men's goals tend to be counting and competitive, like the walking. But don't think you're weird. That's just the way God designed you. But basically, we're talking about some tendencies. The tendency of the man is to be into the goal, and the tendency of the woman is to into be the relationship, whether she's in the marketplace, whether she's home, whether she's in the church. Relationships are always mostly part of her life. The way this is played out is that they go visit the in-laws. And the mother and the daughter smooch, and they go in the kitchen, and the son-in-law and the father-in-law go into the front room. And the mother and the daughter visiting and sharing their lives and how are the kids and all this kind of thing. And pretty soon there's a lot of silence coming out of the front room. And the daughter looks in, and her dad and her husband are reading the paper. And pretty soon she nails her husband and says, "You don't like my dad." And you see, we have a goal, and that is to read the paper. That's what our goal is. We don't have to be visiting to have a relationship. You take business lunches. I don't know if they have some restaurants here that have little back rooms. You'll have 30 or 40 business women come in to the lunch, have a business lunch, and about 45 minutes, then they're visiting and sharing their lives and relationshiping. About 45 minutes later, the waiter comes in to find out what they want to eat to lunch. They don't even know where the menus are. I mean, the menu, oh yeah, that's why we're here, you know. You get a group of men coming in, business people, and the first thing we do is grab the menu and say, let's see, I'll have the ground beef, good, get that done, and then we're there to accomplish something like what the problem in the mailroom or something. But it is not as much, we're not as oriented to visiting and sharing our lives. We kind of want to accomplish something.
But you know, if at home that you would give 10% more, it would seem like 100% to us. When we were raising the kids, it was in the Leave It to Beaver days. You know, our kids are in their 30s now, and so we always had dinner at 6 then, and 6 o'clock, and at 6:30 the kids would go in and watch TV for a half hour, and Chuck and I would talk, and we would visit about our day, and we would. I don't know why we did that right. That was one thing we did right, and so then, see, because he's a doer. My dad sat in a chair the whole evening and read. And Mother would sit in the other chair, Dagwood and Blondie type, but she'd sit in the other chair and she'd crochet or do handwork. And so we didn't have TV in those days, and we lived in an area that mountains surrounded, so it didn't come until after I got out of school. But there would be, Dad wouldn't get up and do a whole lot of things, but Chuck wanted to be in the basement doing things all the time. So if I didn't talk to him at supper time, then I wouldn't have gotten to talk to him at all. But he was just free to do anything he wanted because we had had that time together.
It isn't the fact that we men don't visit, because we do all the time. Dick and I could go out golfing, and we'd just be visiting the whole time. I'd say a nice pot. And hooking a little bit there, aren't you? And do you want Pepsi or Coke at the break? I mean, we just visit and just share our lives, that type of thing.
When we play doubles tennis, the women end up at the net. They've got stuff to say, you know, and the guys are waiting for us to play. And
this reentry where the husband comes home, even if the wife's been in the marketplace, there's still this little reentry where he comes home. And there's been some books read, and I think we know this by personal experience, that this reentry with the husband and the wife connecting again in a visiting relationship way is as important to the wife as sex is to the husband. It has the same value. And I just really believe that, however, on the other hand, that you women need to have a little broader view of sex, in my opinion. You see, the reason God gave Adam the responsibility for this beautiful part of marriage is because Eve never would have thought about it, you know. The human race gets to be about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right down the, you know, we wouldn't be here. So that's why God has given us the responsibility. And so the next time your husband wants to go to bed a little early, women, it's not for himself. It is for the destiny of mankind. It's where God has asked us to be fruitful and multiply, and we're just kind of carrying that out. And I think sometimes you don't get the whole picture on that. This reentry thing, our son, Tim, is a diesel mechanic. And they were having some little struggles early on in their marriage, like everybody does. And so we went out to dinner, and I was talking about it. And I said, well, what happens when Tammy says, how was work? And he says, fine. And I said, well, she needs a little more nap. So I said, this is what you do. And he's a diesel mechanic. The next time Tammy says, how's work, you say this. Tammy, remember, you were working on a 236 engine, and we pulled the pan on that baby, and there were iron shavings in the oil. And you realize that we look into the bearings at that point. And then we thought we might as well pull ahead. And we had the valves were burnt, 1, 3, and 7, and 9 were just cinders. And we had Charlie, who's our valve guy, and he comes up from Lake Washington, and about this time he's giggling and laughing because Tammy studied to be a lawyer, not a diesel mechanic. And so, but I said, trust me. Just go back and trust me. So he went back and did that, and I think he cleaned out the basement or something too. But the point is that he did that and told her about the engine, and he wrote me a note and said that Tammy kissed me on 90% of my body because she was so excited about being a part of his world, about having this sharing something, because it's the time. See, we guys don't know this. It's the time that we take to share. I have a lot of people in the counseling, salesmen especially, where they've been visiting all day and talking all day and trying to sell products all day, and the last thing they want to do just in themselves is to come home and visit a lot more. And so they have to understand the importance of that reentry, of connecting again. But knowing women are into relationships has helped me a lot in traffic. Because a lot of times, especially if you have two women in the car, don't send me your cards and letters. This is not a knock on women drivers. It just means my understanding is when I'm behind two women, then I know I'm not going to get there real soon because they're relationshiping. They're talking about, hello, how are you, just fine. And they don't necessarily know the light is green now. And so they go, oh, the green light. And I'm behind them. And so it gives me a great understanding. I just read my book and check the tires or something. So it helps. In fact, we feel, now that the Cold War is over, I never thought I'd see that, but prior to that, we always thought if the premier of Russia was a woman and the president of the United States was a woman, we surely wouldn't have wars, because at the summit, they'd meet the summit, and Olga would say, my missiles bother you? I'll take 10, you take 10. How are the kids? Let's go for coffee. They'd have this relationship. And war is more of a man thing, conquer that hill and take that city. So maybe we should have a woman president this next time, do you think?
Might help. Then too, women are usually more emotionally responsive. They're sensitive men too, but the tendency is for us to be more emotionally responsive. I can cry at a good book or a TV program, and I'm not threatened by watching them. But Chuck doesn't want to watch anything that's going to touch his emotions. When counseling is needed, see, a man is more closed and a woman is more open. Because we're more emotionally responsive, because we're, able to get things out and it doesn't worry us. When we're in conflict, many times a woman will cry and a man will think that she's just doing that on purpose. The fact is that it's the hormones in our body that cause us or allow us to cry more than you guys. How many times have you watched a man at a memorial service and get through and not cry, where a woman just can't do that? We're just much more emotional. And then too, you don't like emotion and conflict, do you?
Oh, I just feel weak if I'm crying. So I need to see. My generation was saying that big boys don't cry. We play hurt.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard for me to be honest with my feelings.
Yeah. Women, when they love someone, they say tender things to them, and they're soft and that kind of thing. But what we've noticed is that when men love each other, they insult each other. We were in a restaurant, and this guy came in, saw somebody he knew, they tossed insults back and forth at each other, and Chuck said they've just told each other that they love each other. See, and that would hurt us as women. We couldn't stand something like that.
We see that at the baseball down in spring training. It's a little more intimate because the kids are in the stand and everybody's trying to make the team. And Barb would be amazed because somebody would get a hit, and when he came back, they'd say, "Call that a hit?" I mean, what you got, a lead for a glove? I mean, it just, all those little things says, "I love you a lot."
I just couldn't believe it. I said, I don't know how any one of you can perform when you're being put down all the time. But that's what they do. They put each other down all the time. And I didn't understand that was a form of saying I love you, but women don't do that. Also, you know, women, have you ever said something to your husband and you just want understanding and he gives you a solution? Well, if you just do this, that, it run 1, 2, 3. It's hard. You don't want anything but understanding. Well, here's something that is from Scripture, and that is, I think I'll get it in right here, because a man has 2 fears, and that's the fear of failure and the fear of being dominated by a woman. So that when I say something to you, I mean, you automatically take the other side, whether you believed it before I said it in the first place, right?
I hadn't noticed I ever done that.
Oh, yeah? See,
I mean, if you happen to be wrong, I might suggest that there's another way.
yeah, well, whether I'm wrong or not, you would take the other side.
Well, I just want to see how good your background is,
Yes.
you know, see if you know the Scripture or something.
But then, see, if I say you're wrong, then you clam up, right?
I'm not wrong, so that'd be hard to take.
Anyway, this fear of failure. Well, see, when we women, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but when I have a workman come in, fix the stove, fix the dishwasher, I will only give him vague general things that might lead him to it, because if I tell him that I believe it's this, he will look at everything before he will look at that, and it costs more money. Had a guy, the dishwasher wouldn't fill because it kept draining. We found just a little toothpick in this little round ball that didn't come up, so it would stop draining. So he was going to change the part, and I said, well, why change the part? There's nothing wrong with it. Let's just put it back in. Oh, this is not what we do. Well, let's just put it back in. He said, you know, lady, you've cost yourself more money just because we've talked about this so long. See, he wasn't going to be wrong. It took him 2 hours. He checked out every part in that dishwasher before he left. And I realized what was going on.
Tell him about the chair routine with our little football player.
What?
We were on where he had to put the back on.
Oh, we were out doing a seminar, and we had just come in, and we were doing it over a period of weeks. And see, I guess it's just as good a place to tell. There's a book out now called You Just Don't Understand by Deborah Tannen. And she is a linguist, and she has studied how men speak and how women speak, but she studied them from being small children to adults. And a man will talk from the standpoint of status. It's either you're one up, and if you're not one up, you're one down. A woman will talk from the standpoint of intimacy, of making a connection. Here, let me find it in my notes, and I'll tell you more about it. So it really, everything that she said just shows what about the fear of failure, see, and being dominated by a woman. How shall I say it? The male is seen as normative. The female is as departing from the norm. See, that's why you thought I was wrong, because you thought you were the norm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most men do. But it isn't that we're wrong. It's just that we're women. And it is only a short step, she says, maybe an inevitable one from different to worse or wrong. Okay, furthermore, if women's and men's styles are shown to be different, it is usually women who are told to change. Okay, it is cross-cultural communication that we have. All right, the effect of dominance. See, you know, now Chuck really thinks that I'm dominant. The effect of dominance is not always the result of an intention to dominate, and this is the news that brings why she wrote the book. The effect of dominance, see, it is just that men often assume that we want to. Okay, here's how a woman speaks. She speaks from connection. He speaks from status. We speak from intimacy, and we want to avoid isolation. He speaks from independence and wants to avoid failure. This is in a secular book. Life is a community to a woman, a struggle to preserve intimacy and avoid isolation. To a man, life is a contest, a struggle to preserve independence and avoid failure. Intimacy says we're close and the same. Independence says we're separate and different. So I think that, I feel like if I say something, you will just take the opposite. But it's just
I don't mean to. It just maybe you're not right.
Yeah.
So takes.
Well, but it's the way you talk. So here from Scripture, because a woman is told to, let's see, I'm in the wrong place. Because a woman is told to reverence her husband and to build him up and to be all that he needs. See, that if we don't make our husbands feel like they're the most important people in the whole world, we're going to get opposition every time. Because it is just inborn in you, too, to be one up. When, say you're driving, a woman's driving, a man's going to cross the road. You want to stop and allow him to cross the road because that's the law. He goes like this. And so he won't go across in front of you before you go, because if he goes across in front of me, unconsciously I'm one up on him. See, have you ever seen two men saying, so it is this, so she comes up with the same thing by just watching people talk that we came up with from Scripture, that if a woman doesn't put the man in headship, in the position of headship, if the woman doesn't honor her husband, he will have that fear of failure or fear of being dominated by a woman. See, also in 1 Timothy 2, a woman is told not to usurp authority over her husband. I believe 1 Timothy 2 is speaking not of men and women because it's singular. It is a man and a woman. And see, you can't have an interpretation that contradicts another Scripture. So if you say from 1 Timothy 2 that women are subject to all men, you've contradicted a woman is to be subject to her own husband. So that it has to be a husband-wife. It's also in what they say in the Greek is the genitive singular, which is her man. Even if you do translate it, I do not allow a woman to teach or usurp authority over her man. Okay, well, the usurp authority is self-starting authority. We are told as women not to go ahead and do what we know our husband doesn't want us to do. And so if we do that, we have usurped authority. That's the only time that word is used in the New Testament. But by the same token, if a man goes ahead and does what he knows his wife doesn't want him to do, then she's worthless. She feels taken for granted, and that's our great fear of being taken for granted. So you go back to the passive men and wild women. If the wife says she has to talk, and he never agrees to it, he always feels that he's worked harder, he's more tired, he has to be first. But after we haven't had any visiting, any relationship, we've maybe worked all day, we've come home, we've cooked dinner, done the dishes, bathed the kids, gotten them into bed, put a few loads of clothes in the laundry and folded them, and then he says, honey, are you coming to bed? And you go, no way.
Kind of gives you a headache.
It does, a big headache. Because see, there's no relationship. And our great fear of being taken for granted has just been realized. See, no relationship. You just want me. When you want me, you don't want me. You're not at least bit interested in my mind, anything that I think. You do your own thing. See, we can neither one do our own thing ever again after we're married. We've made a commitment to always look out for the other person. We're in covenant. And that means that we are in covenant to always do what the other person, to always support the other person. And also covenant means that you're going to take care of the other person's family and put them first too. So a man's great fear is fear of failure and fear of being dominated by a woman. So I want to talk to Chuck, see. And this is, we used to just get silent. But when he realized that this was his fear, then the mental process is, man, I just hate this. This is my fear of failure. I don't want to do this. Let's talk anyway. See, that's obedience to what the Lord wants you to do. And then as far as being taken for granted, if a man doesn't love his wife as Christ loved the church, and he gave himself up, denied himself, gave himself up for the church, sacrificial love. If a man doesn't love his wife as he loves his own body and nourish and cherish her, then that's when we feel taken for granted. So when we're both obedient, neither one is going to experience their greatest fear. Also, just, say we aren't husband and wife. Say we're just men and women. Matthew 7:12 says, whatever you want others to do for you, do also for them. The golden rule. That's just part of being a Christian. And then 1 Peter 3:9 says, if you want a blessing, give a blessing to receive a blessing. Give a blessing to receive a blessing. That's just the way you walk the normal Christian life. But it's also more than that in a husband-wife situation. Because we have such a close relationship, the fear of failure and the fear of being dominated by a woman are so evident, and also the fear of being taken for granted.
Another thing that has a tendency, not all women this way, not all men are this way, but there's a tendency for women to be more into the details. And we'd be out to dinner and Barb would interrupt. I'd be telling a story and she'd interrupt. And then I'd tell a little more of the story and she'd interrupt. And she'd tell more. Pretty soon I'd say, you tell it, because I obviously was getting it wrong.
You were. Well, men can't remember details.
Well, they're not all that important, really.
Well, they really, if you're sitting at the table and you're telling a story where two other couples were there, those women are going to know you're lying.
Yeah, but that's only two. How about you can speak to thousands and they'll never know. Maybe the two do. But let's say the guy's telling a story. And he says, we were over at the Ely's on Wednesday, and the wife says, no, it's Tuesday. Oh, yeah, Tuesday. And, boy, it reminds me of last summer's vacation. No, 2 summers ago. 2 summers ago. And when we had no, it was the 10th. I mean, who cares? Nobody cares, especially the people who are listening to the story. Barb thought I was lying, I guess. I just want to get to the punchline, tell him the little story.
So you had that fear of failure when I would interrupt?
No, I just want him. It's not that important whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday or whether we had the RV at the tent. It's just what the point is of the whole story. We were going to a tennis camp one time. I think it was Twist or something.
It was Winthrop.
Winthrop? Yeah.
It was.
Okay. They're both, it doesn't make any difference. Anyway, so...
by the way, have you ever noticed that if your husband tells a story the wrong way 2 or 3, 4 times and you don't want to interrupt him because you don't want to make him feel like a failure, you get out there and he tells the story so many times wrong that when you do correct him, he goes, it was not. And he's so got it in his mind. Right.
There was a little gal working for us that was going to go on a vacation to this tennis camp, wherever it is, and I said, be sure and eat in the hotel, because the old miners come down out of the hills with their caps on, and it was really fun to see them eat breakfast. It was just really neat, colorful. So she went on vacation, and she saw Barb before she saw me on the way back, and she said, we never got to the hotel Chuck was talking about. And Barb said, what hotel? Well, it seems I guess the hotel I was thinking about was 150 miles away in another little town. You see one, see them all, type of thing. And but all I can remember is the old miners coming out of the...
And the old miners were not miners, they were tulip farmers and daffodil farmers. And they would come in and sit around this table and gamble every morning about 10 o'clock. But because he knew mining was in Winthrop, then he changed it to the old miners.
Well, they had the hats on with the caterpillar things and whatnot. So the way we solve this, we're to hopefully give you practical solutions, is that we love sports, and the broadcast team, in baseball especially, the guy that does the play-by-play says, and Harold Reynolds hits it and goes through short, and he's on the way to second, and the color guy interrupts, and he says, and Harold Reynolds is from Corvallis, and he's batting .278, and that's his 3rd hit this week. And the play-by-play guy doesn't say, would you shut up? He doesn't do that. Or doesn't get pouted and say, okay, you tell us. No, I mean, I'm not. They fit together good. And so when we go out to dinner with you, I'm doing the play-by-play. Barb does the color. And so she just adds these little details, and it works a lot better. On this detail thing, sometimes, and now this sounds like a put down, but it's really not. I appreciate Barb being into the details, and if that's important, that should be brought up. But let's say that the husband says his dinner ready, and the wife, whether she's in the marketplace, she's home, she's cooking dinner maybe, and she says, well, you know, we went to to school, and I picked up Johnny. I usually pick him up out there by the swings, and he wasn't there. And so I went into the principal's office, and sure enough, he was there, and he'd hurt his knee, and they had to put a Band-Aid on it. And then I stopped by the supermarket on the way home, and I met Mrs. Glutz. You know Miss Glutz. She runs the Awana program. And by the way, we have a meeting Saturday night for the leaders. And then I went on the freeway, and I shouldn't have, because, you know, the construction there at 5th is really bad. And so I got off, and I went through down on 14th and back up on the freeway, and it worked out pretty good. And then no, dinner's not ready. I mean, that's fine, but I mean, we don't really need all that detail necessarily. We need to know whether to go back to our paper or shop while you do the dinner thing. One of the hardest things that I have to work through is when Barb comes home and says, "Notice anything different?" And I'll say, well, let's see, got a new Davenport. Great. Painted the place. Boy, that looks really great. No, she she cleaned the drapes. See, I didn't even know we had drapes, let alone whether they're clean or not. Or she cleaned the cupboards or something, and I'm supposed to notice that the clove is next to the celery saw. She didn't mean that. I mean, and it's not a put down. It's just that I'm not into that kind of detail. Probably the worst thing is when she goes and gets a haircut, and her barber, or whatever they call him, he snips a little snip, snip there, and snip, snip there, and a little snip, snip there. A little microscope, you know, to see how much he should cut off, and that'll be $40. And she comes home and says, "Notice anything different?" "Oh, you got a new Davenport there, huh? Good." Painted the place. Boy, I really like the color. No, you see, ladies, what we need is hints, because we're not in the details as much as you are. What we need you to do is come home and say, "Notice anything about my hair?" And then we can say, "Oh, my heart, you look terrific." Notice anything about the drapes? "Oh, look at those drapes. Oh, boy, that's really great." You know? And notice anything about the kids? "Oh, you had a new one. Good. It's great."
We saw a cartoon once, and the gal was standing at the sink, the guy sitting in a chair, and there's a baby crawling across, and he says, "I know I would have remembered if you told me you were pregnant."
So that'll just give you a little hope, the fact that men, we have to be a little more tolerant with the details, and women, if we get them wrong, forget it. Just let us tell our little story, and we'll get there soon.
Well, talking about failure, you know, fear of failure and fear of being dominated, and also of being taken for granted, I want to tell you a saying about love. See, because despite what we're feeling inside, if the Lord has told us to love each other, that's what we're supposed to do. Okay, love is an act of the will which may or may not be accompanied by a state of mind. Love is a commitment of our wills. It is, I will give you love when I feel like it, when I don't feel like it, and until I do feel like it. And the I don't love you any longer is usually I don't like something that you did. See, because love is not a feeling. It's a matter of your will. There is a saying that your mind controls your actions, your will controls your mind, and you control your will. So in secular psychology, very, very often, when the relationship has broken up, a psychiatrist will have the person coming in for counsel, just think negative thoughts about the other person to fall out of love. And see, and that's what we do. Love is a matter of the will. We decide that we're going to think right about our mates. We decide that we're going to do the right thing, that we're going to be obedient. Because our mind controls our actions. Our will controls our mind, but we control our will. And so we will to do what the Lord wants us to do. We are what we've decided to be. See? whatever your goal is, whatever the purpose in your life. Chuck used to think that I didn't have any goals. As a matter of fact, it was so bad. Have you ever read Type A Behavior in Your Heart? And they talk about Type A people and Type B people. Well, you know that Chuck's a Type A. But he used to tell me that I was a D minus, sitting on the fence watching the rest of the world go by. And it was real hard. So I had goals, and I had decided that I wanted to be a godly woman. So when I would sit and study and be in the Bible, that was a goal. When I would put underwear in his drawer because I wanted to be a good wife, then that was a goal. He never considered the wash getting done and underwear back in his drawer a goal. See? And women have just different goals than men do. The person who is used of God is the person who does what God says even when he doesn't understand it. See? So it is when you know that your mate has this fear of failure, or you know that your mate has this fear of being taken for granted, then love does what the other person needs.
This love is really important. Gary Smalley's done a lot of good books on it. He was my third party to teach me all about love. And I think the first thing we think about is 1 Corinthians 13. I just want to use this as kind of a measuring stick just for a minute, because a lot of times we have people come into our lives that one or the other says, I don't love my husband anymore, or I don't love my wife anymore. And we really, hopefully with love and sincerity, say, what's that got to do with it? Are you doing loving things? See, love, like Gary says, love is a decision. Love is an act of our will. It's what we do. It has nothing to do with what we feel. And yet we're always we think the fuzzies from dating should continue through 40 years of marriage, and we get more into the friendship. We get more into the companionship. In our book, we talk a little bit about 1 Corinthians 13, and what I'd like you to do right now is just personalize this in your own life, in your own relationship, and see if you are in love, to see if you are doing love. Love is patient. I have a lot of trouble with that. I'm the world's, in fact, I wrote a book called I Prayed for Patience and Other Horror Stories. But patience, I'm the world's most impatient person, so when I'm impatient with Barb, I'm not showing love. I'm not in love with Barb when I'm impatient with her. Love is kind. Am I being kind to Barb? Love is never jealous. Bothers me a little bit because she's a very deep teacher. She teaches this neat Bible study, precept upon precept. Kay Arthur in Chattanooga writes it. Wonderful Bible study. And she'll spend all day Monday studying for a woman's class on Tuesday. And I'm more of an exhorter. I love the Bible. It's changed my life. I tend to get it in 5-minute segments. I'll get it 5 minutes if I'm early for a client. I'll get 5 minutes in the car. I have a bathroom Bible, and so I'll get through it. But I want to go out and see if we can live those principles. And so I used to be a little jealous of that, of the fact that she was so deep into the Word and into the Greek and into all the tenses and whatnot. But again, that came back as the completing me. And I appreciate that now.
And you assumed that I thought that you were supposed to be like me.
Well, I felt criticized. In other words, I wasn't like you.
But I didn't criticize.
No, I know you didn't. I just felt that way. And so if I was jealous of your ability to do that, then that wouldn't have been love.
Mm-hmm.
Love is never envious. How are you doing on that? Love is never boastful. Love is never proud. Love is not haughty. Here's a big one. Love is not selfish. I mean, that's the dirtiest word in the four-letter word in language is self. That is, maybe you'll differ on me this, but I believe that most divorces are based on one or the other being selfish. And I understand there's two sides of the problem. Some of you have been rejected and abandoned, and you had no say in whether your mate was going to take off or not. And I understand that. And they really were exhibiting selfishness. And so oftentimes marriage relationships come down to what am I getting out of this relationship rather than what can I give to this relationship. Love is not rude. Love does not demand its own way. Love is not irritable. Love is not touchy. Love does not hold grudges. In other words, forgiveness is a big part of marriage. Love doesn't notice when you do something wrong. Love is never glad about injustice. Love rejoices when truth wins out. Love is loyal. Love believes in a person. Love expects the best from the person. Love defends a person. Now, I have to go through every one of those and work hard at being love to Barb. And my suggestion to you is to do the same thing. How are you doing your kindness? How are you doing your patience? How are you doing in showing, doing, loving things? That's what love is all about. And then, God is very faithful. Most of the time, the feelings come later. And they will follow the doing, but for sure, the doing comes first.
Well, I think when we love each other, then, see, if you love me, then I would respond to you in a kind way. And then you'd think I was neat because I was kind to you. And then it would come back and forth like that. But instead, when we get selfish, we want our own way. And even, Romans, I think it's 2:4, the last part of the verse says that we are one to the Lord by his kindness rather than his harshness. And when we want our own way, we start getting harsh instead of being kind, and do just the opposite of the golden rule, or giving a blessing to receive a blessing. We get critical instead.